The Sweet Sound of Success show is brought to you by the Mentor Studio. The Mentor Studio is an exclusive mentoring and training program for social influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and startups, bringing personal development to the underserved around the world. And brought to you by Success Strategists. Simple strategies that work to develop your business with flow and ease using proven strategies and the right tactics. This is the Sweet Sound of Success with Sue Wilhite, Profit Attraction Master. Alina Boyte is the founder and director of the Changemaker Institute. She's a Stanford Law graduate with a PhD in copyright law. Established businesses and entrepreneurs hire Alina to reveal the hidden impact in their business and to bridge the gap between profitability and social impact. Welcome, Alina. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, Sue, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, yeah, and I'm fascinated with what got you to where you are. Copyright law, I think if I was going to be a lawyer, that would be what I would be interested in. Because it's fascinating to me. Intellectual property, creativity,
yes,
in general is fascinating to me. And so all the intricacies of that, and goodness, do we live in a strange new world?
We sure do.
Yeah. So for my viewers and listeners who haven't necessarily seen this show before, the way that this works is the subtitle of the show is The Hero's Journey for the Entrepreneur's Soul. And so what I do is I'm fascinated with the way that entrepreneurs get going in their business and in their lives. And so I'm using the structure of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey cycle in this interview. So we're going to go over 5 pieces out of the 16 or so that Joseph Campbell created. And we're going to talk about the ordinary beginning, which always makes me laugh. There's nobody ordinary. The call to action. What got you on this path, this wonderful, strange path? And the big, hairy monsters that you get to play with when you start the entrepreneurial journey. And sometimes that's the call to action. That's what prompts you as a big hairy monster comes out of the woodwork and you go, oh, I need to solve that problem. Or you get into being an entrepreneur and big hairy monsters pop out of the woodwork and you get to solve that problem. And then the 2 things that I think are really, really important for people to understand and process about the entrepreneurial journey is we all do it with allies, mentors, guides, coaches, wind beneath our wings, supporters, cheerleaders. You can't do it. You just cannot do it without that kind of people in your life. So we talk about those. And then finally, the journey home. And Joseph Campbell talks about this as when the hero has had all of these adventures and dealt with the big hairy monsters and solved whatever problems it is, how do the other people in your life deal with that? And sometimes I've interviewed folks who come from families of entrepreneurs and it's just grand and everybody's like totally with it, except for some friends who are still kind of, what does that family do? And sometimes you get when are you going to get a real job? Sorts of things. And that is the basic question that the entrepreneur gets to deal with. So with all of that being said, Alina, what was your ordinary beginning?
Oh, Sue, thanks for that. So it's really interesting the way you describe the entrepreneurial journey, right? So the very beginning for me, my I've always thought that I grew up in a family of academics, like my dad and my mom. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and my dad taught English, um, and I've always thought of myself as being, a child of academics, and hence, me going into academia now, I mean today. But now when I'm in this on this entrepreneurial journey and I look back at my family, my parents are actually really entrepreneurial. Like my mom was a kindergarten teacher, but she started her own kindergarten, right? And it's not, yes, it's not easy to start your own kindergarten and have to figure out how to run it on a day-to-day basis. And now when I look back, she dealt with everything from, getting uniforms to making sure the kids had good food every day, and making sure that there were teachers who were well trained. I mean,
Right.
there was so many things that went into just running a kindergarten, and so was my dad. He was very entrepreneurial as well. He wrote books that he would try to sell, and he would go from store to store and leave the books there. And when they sold, then the store owner would then contact him, and then he would go and get the payment. And so now looking back, they were actually very entrepreneurial, even though at that time I've always looked at them as teachers. Yeah. And so because, growing up, academics have been so important at home. One thing led to another. I studied hard. I got the scholarships. I ended up in really great universities. And then when I was at Stanford, my advisor convinced me that the best path after school was to go into academia, which I did. So I'm now a tenured professor at Mississippi College, and I teach law. And like you say, my background is in intellectual property, which I'm happy to talk more to you and your audience about. As we go through the entrepreneurial journey. But I guess the starting point for me to then think about entrepreneurship is, as I was really interested in making things better for my daughter. Like I never thought about academia. Sorry, I never thought about entrepreneurship till I had my daughter.
Right.
And the thing that really was the impetus to, I did some, I served as expert witness on the side. I did some branding advisory on the side. But what really made me create the Changemaker Institute was really my daughter, and thinking about the world that she would grow up in the, and ever since she was young, and in looking at how, the world can be beautiful in so many aspects, but there can also be a lot of injustice and
Right.
and harm. Right.
We've certainly seen that in the last year.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That we as humans are contribute. I mean, it's, you don't even have to look far, right? You can just look at how the environment is degrading. That you can see the impact that the human beings are making on society. And so that really was the impetus for me to create the Changemaker Institute. And one of the things that I loved being out in school in California was being able to go out to the Pacific, and the whales would be there, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and my fear is that in 30 years, when she wants to go there, they won't be there anymore, and that's my thinking. And so I was at Mass, and I heard a visiting priest come to speak to us about some of the work that they were doing around poverty and hunger. And he was describing, how some parts of the world are so poor that they have to ration the food out and make sure that the men ate first, so that they could have the energy to go into the fields and work. And the younger ones, especially the girls, would stay back. And sometimes the mother would have to tell them, today is not your turn to eat. And when he said that, and I looked at my daughter, I just started crying, because I couldn't bear the thought of ever saying that to her, right? That today is not your turn to eat, when she's asking for food, and to say that, and so I started looking at things like social impact, like how do we as human beings create that impact? And we can do it as individuals, right? We can make donations to nonprofit organizations, or we can hope that the government has the resources that it has to make that change, right? Or we can rely on philanthropic organizations to make that change. But that there is this movement towards businesses, that expectation that businesses perform that role, right? And so, I don't know if you know this, right? But there are, I think, 35 states, including the District of Columbia, that has a different kind of corporate structure, like the public benefit corporation, right?
Right. The B Corps.
Right, the B Corps, right? That allow companies to pursue a profit mission and a social impact mission, and the obligation of the board of directors and all that is it's geared towards both profits and mission.
Right, it's the triple win.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Best invention ever, I think.
Right. I love that the Changemaker Institute is actually incorporated as a public benefit corporation. And hopefully within the year we would get we would apply for B Corp certification. But it was that really interested me, because businesses have a way to change social structures and market structures that government, philanthropic organizations, or nonprofits cannot, right? And so I started thinking about, okay, what can we do to help businesses position themselves as a force for good in the world, and with my background in intellectual property and thinking about things like innovation and product market fit and all those things, and writing about economics and morality and ethics, I'm taking all of that in trying to introduce that to businesses, so that they have a framework to work with, to do two things excellently, really well. Number one is creating an impact that is meaningful, and number two, making sure that they are profitable in the process.
Right, absolutely. Because otherwise, it's like, I know it's going to be weird for some of my viewers to think about it, but for a business, profit is what's the energy. Right?
Yes.
If the business doesn't have profit, the business dies.
Exactly. And one way, right?
You can't function without it.
Right.
And yet, you can't be greedy and overeat.
No. Right. So one
attack.
Right. One way of driving that point home to your audience too is to say that you cannot make an impact without profits. That there is no way you can make an impact, the impact that you want to make, the change that you want to see. You cannot do that without being profitable.
Right. It's not going to happen.
Right. Which is why we work on two things, right? We want to make sure that you create meaningful impact, and then making sure that the business that you've designed is profitable by looking at how do you price your product, what are the costs that are involved in producing that product, right? What costs can eliminate?
Right, exactly. So what were some of the what I call the big hairy monsters? What were some of the things that you've run into along this journey?
Yeah, so I guess the big hairy monsters can be external, and it can also be internal.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I can start with the internal first, and then we'll talk about the external monsters. I think the biggest internal hurdle for me in this journey is getting away from academic thinking and what people think of me. I think that's the biggest. To be honest, so you are the second interview that I'm doing where I'm actually putting myself out there. So it's as an academic, it's easy to hide behind the data and the books, and you don't really have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and talk about your monsters, right?
Right.
You can talk about the
right. And with an academic, everything is about reputation. everything is about reputation, how you are viewed by your peers, by everything. And so, yeah, it's really hard to put yourself out there in a different way that maybe your academic peers or bosses don't necessarily like, what the heck is she doing?
True. Right. So
Yeah.
you nailed it. You've nailed it right on the head. That was my biggest fear. I mean, I was so afraid that there would be a conflict between, what the administration expected of me as an academic and my peers. What would they think of me? What is she doing?
Right.
And especially since I've worked so hard to get where I am in academia. So it was a huge thing for me to break away from that. But Sue, the more I do and the more that I talk to people who are not in academia and realize that I'm making so much sense to them, I mean, that's validation back, know.
Right.
And it's not as scary as I thought. It's I'm getting into the momentum and the feeling more comfortable. And to be honest, I think academia and business can be bridged. Like that, there is a nice middle ground where you can actually bring academic learning and academic teachings and models into business.
Yes. Yeah. Not enough to stifle it, but enough to inform it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have tons of friends in academia. And I always say, if you came into this world with a trigger called "what will people think," academia makes that thing like exquisitely sensitive.
It's so true.
And it just reinforces it and reinforces it and reinforces it. So I have to say, good on you for
exactly. That's why we're called the ivory tower, right? You're up there and there's ivory tower thinking about models and everything and not bringing that into reality. So
Right.
one of the goals of the Changemaker Institute, besides empowering businesses to be a force for good, is really to bridge academia and business.
Nice.
So maybe down the line, we can have a summit where academics can come and present their models and everything, and have business people attend as well. Because academics like to present models in academic conferences where it stays there, right?
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what were some of the external hairy monsters that came out?
Yeah. So I think the external, I think largely the monsters have been internal so far. I think a lot of internal monsters, but I think the external monsters, I think, would be knowing who to trust. Because in academia you present and you expect people to attribute you for your work, that there is that expectation, that trust among colleagues,
right?
That you don't get in business. Not it's a little bit less, it's harder to have that expectation in business, I think. And what I've learned is to be a little bit more, what can I say, so
it depends on the business.
Yes, it depends on who you're dealing with. Exactly, right? The individual. And I think what I'm learning to the hard way is to be careful about what you say to who, and not to disclose too much, and I think that's one of the big hairy monsters for me is figuring out who you can regard as a trusted colleague, in business.
An ally.
An ally, exactly, and mentor, right? And who may, and separating that from those who may pretend to be, but who may turn out not to be.
Right. But you know what? That's something that you get to do in life anyway.
That's true.
It's
True.
it's all day long human beings go through with this judgment process and
Yes.
figuring out who you can trust and who you can't,
Yeah.
and whether they're a business or a bar.
Yes.
Or a coffee shop, or or on the internet. We get to make these judgments all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And copyright law is a lot about that.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly, that's true, right? Because you don't want to reveal too much that people can then run with your idea, right? You want to.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of allies, so who were some of your who are some of your allies and mentors and guides?
Yeah. So I had two really great mentors when I was a student at Stanford, who's kind of seen me, go through and get tenure and everything. One was my direct advisor, who is like he's a huge big name in copyright law, Paul Goldstein. And another was she was more a feminist theory, and she wrote a lot on leadership and ethics. So she wasn't in my field directly, but she was a great mentor, and I loved her. I loved her. And she passed early this year, and it was really rough because I felt like I lost someone dear to me. The thing about academia, and when I mentioned to her that this is what I was doing, she was not judgmental. There was no judgment about what are you doing, what you should be in academia. And I took that as a positive sign. And and if she was still around and the Changemaker Institute was more established, she would be one person I would want on the board of directors.
Right. Right.
So it was heartbreaking to lose her. And the funny thing is that when a void exists, when you have a void, and there's an openness to other things, you meet someone else who can come into that space. And so I recently did meet someone who I have a lot of respect for, who's not in academia. In fact, she's a successful business owner. She teaches people how to speak well, and she's built herself up and is a really successful business now, right? And she's kind of stepped into that role, right? So I love her to death, and in a different way, than I did my former teacher, right? But she has done things for me that like working with her helped me overcome this self-doubt, and having the confidence to actually go out and speak about about the business.
Right.
And so talking to you was really one of, coming on podcasts and coming out and talking about the business was really at her encouragement. And so taking her up on that.
Speaking is the greatest thing, to get your word out, to get your message out.
Yeah.
And to create connection. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah. And as an academic, I like to write, so and I realized that there is a huge difference between coming out and talking about your business and writing about it in a blog,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's more vulnerable, but it really is more impactful for you to speak it in front of people.
Yeah.
I mean, the words have changed things, words on paper have changed things for others for millennia. And speaking the message is the huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely, Sue. You're spot on.
Yeah. So how is it for folks at home with you? How is it people in your personal sphere? How do they react to you taking this interesting sort of side path and forming your own company and going for B Corp status and all of that?
So my husband is incredibly supportive. So he's amazingly supportive, and he's been encouraging me to do more of this talks as well. Come go and talk about the business. So he has been incredibly supportive. He himself is an entrepreneurial spirit. Like he likes to try this out. Doesn't work, let's change it, pivot, and then So he is definitely not an academic.
Mm.
Yeah. And we together, we have a 6-year-old daughter who I think just appeared just now. Made a little cameo. She I guess she's too young to understand. You don't think so? 6-year-olds, probably she understands. Yeah,
there was a 6-year-old who made several $1 million on YouTube a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
He reviewed toys on YouTube and talked about how they impacted him and whether he liked them and what he didn't like, and made millions of dollars when he was 6.
But actually, now that you mentioned it, yes, it does remind. So right now she's not
invented things at 6 and 7. So yeah, that they see a problem, they do it.
Now that you mention it, it does remind me of a funny thing that happened when she was a little bit younger. So she's 6 now. So this must have been when she was about maybe 3 or 4, when she was learning to draw, and she would draw all these pictures like on a piece of paper and bring it to my school, to the law school with her, and she would try to sell them to my colleagues. So
Yes.
like if you if you want it, it would be $20, and my colleague would say, "What, just $20? Are you sure?" And she said, "Well, maybe a little bit more." And my colleague would say, "Well, I'm not sure if I'm willing to pay that much," and they would negotiate. Yeah, so it reminded me of that incident.
You need, yeah. Yeah, start this one training.
Yeah, kids are funny. Yeah.
Yes. Well, wonderful. So we're going to put the links to your organization in the below here now, and also in the afterward after this. Do you have any last words of wisdom for the world, for businesses, for academia?
Yeah, I really want to encourage businesses, especially the people that are tuning into this video, to really think about putting your business and positioning your business as a force for good in the world. And you want to be clear on the impact that you're having. And when we talk about impact, the word impact is kind of nebulous, right? What do we mean by impact? What does that look like? And I really want to encourage everyone. I actually have it printed out here to look at the Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh my, there you go.
And there are 17 of those goals that you can align your business with to actually create impact that is meaningful. So you're not trying to figure out what impact looks like. You have that on paper, right? So just go to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of those goals for you to work with, and the UN has already worked it out for you, like the metrics, the measurement that you can use, right? So align the business with that. And number 2, think about being profitable. It's so important. And the one word about profitability is to figure out where can you cut costs without compromising value to your customer,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And a really good way, especially if we're doing impact work, is to reduce advertising costs by being an advocate for the SDGs. So Patagonia is well known for being an environmental activist. They charge premium prices on their clothes, but yet their advertising cost is minuscule compared to like Nike and their competitors, right? And so I really want to encourage you as a business to do that. And then hopefully, by 2030, which is the deadline to see the sustainable development goals being a little bit more effective or success there, we see some progress, in making the world a better place.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alina. Thank you for being on my show. Your message is awesome. And yes, more businesses need to know about this. And more, just in general, more people need to know about this because they need to demand it of the businesses that they work with, right? That's, it could be a top down and a bottom up simultaneously.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, thank you for being my guest. And thank you to all of my viewers and listeners of The Sweet Sound of Success.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
What are your dreams for your business? You know what drives me crazy? Really smart business owners denying their talents because they've been taught it has to be hard, because they've been taught that they don't deserve their gifts, that they're not worth anything. They've been taught that their gender means they can't express their genius. I'm Sue Wilhite, and I want you to have access to your genius. I want you to go out and rock the world with your genius. So I created the Call to Action Coaching Program. It's all about getting to the heart of you and what you've got to share with the world to make a profitable business that thrives and allows you to make a difference in the world. Click the link to sign up for the Call to Action Coaching Program today. Don't let your genius go unnoticed.